Halo teman-teman semuanya, perkenalkan nama aku Ahmad Rifky Ramadhan Tomagola dari program studi S1 Teknologi Pendidikan dengan NIM 2501022622. Di video ini saya akan membahas tentang analisis kritis teori teknologi pendidikan dan juga bagaimana penerapannya bisa kita lihat dalam pembelajaran abad ke-21. Tujuan video ini sederhana, biar kita sama-sama bisa bisa memahami apa sebenarnya teknologi pendidikan itu, bagaimana prinsip creating, using, dan managing diterapkan secara etis, dan gimana teknologi serta pendidikan saling berhubungan dalam membentuk fondasi pembelajaran masa kini. Kalau dengar kata teknologi pendidikan, banyak orang langsung mikir soal alat seperti laptop, proyektor, atau aplikasi pembelajaran online. Padahal, sebenarnya teknologi pendidikan jauh lebih luas dari itu. Menurut AICTE tahun 2008, teknologi pendidikan adalah the study and ethical practice of facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological process and research. Kalimat ini mungkin terdengar panjang, tapi intinya ada dua hal penting dalam kalimat tersebut. Yang pertama, teknologi pendidikan bukan cuma praktik, tapi juga bidang kajian ilmiah. Yang kedua, tujuannya adalah memfasilitasi pembelajaran dan meningkatkan kinerja, bukan sekedar menggunakan alat. Nah, definisi ini juga diperkuat oleh pendapat Seals dan Ricci tahun 1994 yang menjelaskan bahwa teknologi pendidikan mencakup proses sistematis untuk merancang, mengembangkan, menggunakan, dan mengevaluasi sumber belajar. Kesimpulan saya dengan bahasa yang lebih sederhana, teknologi pendidikan itu seperti jembatan antara teori belajar dan praktik pembelajaran di dunia nyata. Melalui jembatan ini, teori-teori seperti behaviorisme, kognitivisme, konstruktivisme bisa diwujudkan menjadi pengalaman belajar yang konkret. Dan jembatan itu pastinya kita rancang dengan alat, strategi, dan kreativitas yang sesuai dengan peserta didik.
In this video, I would like to address a few terminological issues that I have encountered and that have produced a number of misunderstandings or just confusion either in myself or the people I talk with. The first terminological issue that I would like to clarify is this distinction between technology education and educational technology. In technology education, essentially, we are focusing on the inner workings of the technologies that we're using. So we are interested in learning and teaching about how, for example, the computer works, or the internet, or our mobile devices. In educational technology, we're not focusing on technologies, but we're using technologies to learn and teach something. So the focus is not on the technology, but on the use of technology. Now it's important to clarify what we mean when we say that we're using technologies, either for teaching or learning. Here again, we should make a crucial distinction between merely operating a piece of technology and using that technology. What does that mean? Well, essentially, operating a piece of technology, it means that at the very basic level, we're able to switch it on and off. In other words, we have full control of the behavior of the technology we're using. This means, for example, that we are familiar with all the features or part of the features of a given piece of technology or an application. So when we operate Facebook, that means that we can create a group, post a picture, a text, or simply control the privacy settings. Using means more than just operating a piece of technology. Let's make again the example with Facebook. I may post a picture of my holiday, or while reading a book, I can actually post a passage from that book that is particularly interesting and that I would like to discuss with my Facebook contacts. In these two examples, I'm actually operating Facebook the very same way. I'm, in other words, using the function post a picture. But the meaning that the pictures have are completely different. In the first case, I'm letting my friends know that I'm on holiday and I'm pretty happy. In the second case, I would like to engage my Facebook contacts. It's something like a discussion about the very passage from that book that I'm reading. In the second case, I'm clearly engaging my Facebook contacts in a different way that resembles something like a learning activities, at least because I'm trying to understand something. The main difference is the context. In the first case, I'm letting my friends know something about my private life, whereas in the second case, the context is something more like a learning context. That's because I'm involved in an activity in which I want to understand something. In educational technology, the context is clearly dealing with teaching and learning. In other words, is educational or pedagogical. In other words, we are using all our technologies in order to teach or learn something. There is now a third and last terminological issue that I would like to address, which is the very meaning of the word tool or technology. I use the two terms interchangeably. When we talk about tools in educational technology, we mostly refer to the latest digital technologies. So we talk about the smartphones, we talk about tablets, artificial intelligence, virtual reality headsets. But actually, this is a quite narrow conception of what a tool is. And as a matter of fact, there are many other tools that we wouldn't actually label as educational tools. One of which is our educational institutions. Educational institutions are, in my opinion, the most powerful and most important educational tools that we actually have in our toolbox. And the reason is educational institutions are the tools we are using to organize the very core of education, which is in the end learning and teaching. So, for example, when I'm saying that educational institutions arrange or organize teaching and learning, I mean the division in subjects, the curriculum, and even in a way the learning environments in which teachers and students interact. The reason why we have to look at our educational institutions is that very often these are the barriers for teachers, for example, to incorporate new technologies into their teaching practice. But sometimes the way in which the educational institutions are arranged are also barriers for students to become more active and to contribute to the learning process. So the design of our educational institutions should be actually considered one of the major tasks in educational technology, specifically because they affect so much the context in which we are operating and using our technologies. In this video, I've tried to clarify a few terminological issues. The first was between technology, education, and educational technology. The point that I made was that in educational technology, we are using the technology to learn or teach something, whereas in technology education, we are focusing on the very technologies we're using. Then I made the distinction between operating a technology and using a technology. The main difference is the context. We can operate the same very feature of a given application, but the meaning can be very different because the context is different. I claim that educational technology is that discipline in which we are using tools for pedagogical purpose. The last terminological issues that I try to clarify concern the very word tool or technology, which, as I said, I used interchangeably. I made the case that we have to look at our educational institutions because they are the tools that we're using to organize and arrange our teaching and learning activities. Educational institutions have such a big impact on the very context in which we're using digital technologies. So this is all. Thank you for your attention.
Oke, sekarang kita masuk ke inti dari teknologi pendidikan. Di inti dari teknologi pendidikan ini ada 3 prinsip penting yang harus diterapkan, yaitu creating, using, dan managing. Pertama, ada creating. Creating berarti kita merancang atau menciptakan sumber belajar yang efektif dan menarik. Contohnya, guru membuat video pembelajaran interaktif menggunakan Canva atau Capcut untuk menjelaskan konsep sains. Proses ini nggak cuma soal desain yang bagus, tapi juga pemahaman tentang karakteristik peserta didik dan teori belajar yang sesuai. Kedua, ada using. Using berarti bagaimana sumber belajar itu digunakan secara efektif. Misalnya, di sekolah abad 21, guru menggunakan learning management system seperti Google Classroom atau Moodle untuk mengatur materi, tugas, dan diskusi. Dengan begitu, pembelajaran jadi lebih fleksibel dan kolaboratif. Ketiga, ada managing. Managing ini fokus pada pengelolaan seluruh sistem pembelajaran, mulai dari perencanaan, penyimpanan, sumber belajar, sampai evaluasi hasilnya. Contohnya, guru mengatur jadwal belajar daring, memastikan siswa punya akses internet, dan menilai hasil belajar secara adil. Tapi satu hal yang gak kalah penting adalah etika dalam setiap tahapnya. Kita harus tahu kapan teknologi digunakan dengan bijak dan kapan lebih baik pakai pendekatan sederhana. Tujuannya bukan untuk pamer teknologi, tapi memastikan siswa benar-benar belajar secara efektif dan manusiawi. Sekarang, gimana sih hubungan antara teknologi dan pendidikan? Pendidikan adalah proses membentuk manusia agar tumbuh dalam pengetahuan, sikap, dan keterampilan. Sementara teknologi hadir sebagai alat dan sistem yang membantu proses itu supaya lebih efektif dan relevan. Keduanya saling melengkapi. Tanpa pendidikan, teknologi kehilangan arah. Tanpa teknologi, pendidikan bisa tertinggal dalam menghadapi tantangan zaman. Dalam pembelajaran abad 21, teknologi membuka banyak peluang. Yang pertama, membuat siswa lebih kritis dan kreatif. Yang kedua, mendorong kolaborasi dan komunikasi global. Dan yang ketiga, serta membangun pengalaman belajar yang lebih konstekstual dan menyenangkan. Misalnya, dalam project-based learning, siswa bisa meneliti lewat internet, bekerja sama lewat Google Docs, dan mempresentasikan hasilnya lewat video. Itulah bentuk nyata dari hubungan sinergi antara teknologi dan pendidikan. Atau dengan kata lain, teknologi tanpa nilai pendidikan hanyalah alat, tapi pendidikan tanpa dukungan teknologi bisa kehilangan relevansinya.
Technology opens a window to a wealth of knowledge, but also to other, engaging ways of learning. For many, it provided an education lifeline, as it did during the pandemic. It helps us bring out fresh ideas, lets us test them, share them, and engage with each other. But technology does not always live up to its potential. Many cannot access it, cannot use it to teach. Technology may not fit into the way we learn. It may override rather than to support. Connections can break down barriers, but nothing beats human interaction. We learn best from each other. Good impartial evidence when we want to choose the right technology is scarce. Freedom to create online is transformative, but not if the content can't be trusted. When grand plans are made, who pays is often forgotten. How we pay with our humanity, with our privacy, and with our planet too. The 2023 GEM report asks us to question on whose terms we're using technology in education. Is it appropriate for what we need? Does it leave anyone behind? Are we tracking when it's worth the investment and honest when it fails? And is it setting us off on a path we can sustain? Our decisions must keep the learner at the centre, because not all technology is progress. Learners should take from technology only what they need, so that they can use it safely and critically. That they are empowered to learn without it too, so that when we use technology, it is only on our terms.
Dari semua pembahasan tadi, bisa kita simpulkan 3 hal utama. Pertama, teknologi pendidikan adalah bidang yang memadukan teori belajar dan praktik pembelajaran melalui pendekatan sistematis dan etis. Kedua, prinsip creating, using, dan managing menjadi dasar penting dalam merancang, menggunakan, dan mengelola pembelajaran yang efektif. Dan ketiga, teknologi dan pendidikan punya hubungan timbal balik yang kuat. Keduanya sama-sama membentuk masa depan pembelajaran yang lebih inovatif dan manusiawi. Dan untuk sebagai refleksi pribadi, saya merasa bahwa peran kita sebagai mahasiswa teknologi pendidikan bukan cuma jadi pengguna alat, tapi juga perancang pengalaman belajar. Kita harus bisa menilai kapan teknologi benar-benar membantu dan kapan pendekatan manusiawi lebih dibutuhkan. Karena pada akhirnya, tujuan utama dari teknologi pendidikan bukanlah sekedar membuat pembelajaran terlihat canggih, tapi membuatnya bermakna, mudah diakses, dan berdampak nyata bagi peserta didik. Terima kasih sudah menonton video ini sampai akhir. Semoga pembahasan yang saya berikan tentang teori teknologi pendidikan ini bisa memberi gambaran yang jelas dan inspiratif untuk teman-teman semua. Jangan lupa untuk terus belajar, terus beradaptasi, dan jadilah bagian dari perubahan positif di dunia pendidikan. TP.
So, I'm from Guatemala. This is a public service announcement. That is where Guatemala is. Also, that is not where they keep the prisoners. That is called Guantanamo. Not the same place. So, Guatemala is right below Mexico. And for the Americans in the audience, and let this sink in because it really applies in most ways. For the Americans in the audience, you can think of it as Mexico's Mexico. Just like the US doesn't want illegal immigration from Mexico, Mexico doesn't want illegal immigration from Guatemala. It's a smaller country, it's a poorer country, and, well, what can I tell you? It has much better Mexican food. Guatemala is a very poor country, and a lot of people talk about education as something that brings equality to different social classes. But I always saw it as the opposite, as something that brings inequality. Because what happens in practice is that people who have a lot of money can buy themselves a really good education and therefore continue having a lot of money, whereas people who don't have very much money barely learn how to read and write, and therefore never make a lot of money, and this is especially true in poor countries. Now, I was fortunate that I received a rich person's education, even though I didn't grow up rich. And it's because I'm an only child, and my mother, who was a single mother, spent all of her resources on my education. And this allowed me to come to college to the US and eventually get a PhD in computer science. Now, because of all of this, about 10 years ago, I decided that I wanted to do something that would give equal access to education to everyone. Oh, by the way, this is what I want to talk to you about today, giving equal access to education to everyone. At the time, I was a professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University, and I decided to work on this with my PhD student, Severin. The way my brain works, all of education is just too general of a problem. So I decided, let's start by teaching one thing. And then I started thinking, okay, well, what should we teach first? Should we teach math? I mean, we both loved math. Me and my co-founder, we both love math. And, we didn't decide to do math. Then we started thinking, well, maybe we should teach computer science. But eventually, and this is maybe surprising to people in North America, eventually we decided that the best subject to start with was teaching foreign languages. And let me tell you why. There's a number of reasons. One of them is that there's a huge audience for it. There's about 2 billion people in the world learning a foreign language, both in school and outside of schools. Most of these people, by the way, are learning English. About 80% of them are learning English. In this weird map right here, all the countries in green are countries in which people are predominantly learning English. And the reason for that is because English can truly transform your life. In most countries in the world, knowledge of English can significantly increase your income potential. So this is another reason why we decided to start with foreign languages, and it's because you can directly make more money if you learn another language, in particular English. And see, this is pretty different than many other subjects. For example, take math. In the case of math, just knowledge of math does not increase your income potential, because usually you have to learn math to then learn physics, to then become a civil engineer, like that's how you make more money. Whereas with languages, if you were a waiter and you learn English, now you can be a waiter at a hotel and make more money. So we decided, well, let's get started by teaching languages. Now, we also convinced ourselves that the only way to really reach a lot of people was by using a mobile phone, or a smartphone in particular. See, building schools all over the world is simply too expensive. On the other hand, most of the world's population already has access to a smartphone, and the trend is that that fraction is only going to increase. So we decided at the time that we would make a way to learn foreign languages on a mobile phone that was accessible to everyone. And then we called it Duolingo. Thank you. Now, in order to truly be accessible to everyone, rich and poor, Duolingo uses a freemium model to support itself. What that means is that you can learn as much as you want without ever having to pay. But if you don't pay, you may have to see an ad at the end of a lesson. Now, if you don't like ads, you can also pay to subscribe to turn off the ads. And it turns out that the vast majority of the revenue for Duolingo comes from people who pay to subscribe to turn off the ads. Now, who are these people who pay to subscribe to turn off the ads? Well, they're usually people, they're well-off people in rich countries like the US and Canada. Who are the people who don't pay to subscribe? They usually come from poorer countries like Brazil or Vietnam or Guatemala. So what I like about this model is that it is a small form of wealth redistribution, because we're basically getting the rich people to pay for the education of everyone. So I like that. Yes. So great. So with smartphones, we can reach a lot of people, and we can even get the rich people to pay for the whole thing. This is great. However, if you're trying to deliver education with a smartphone, you run into a humongous problem. And it is that smartphones come equipped with some of the most addictive drugs that humanity has ever engineered. TikTok, Instagram, mobile games. See, delivering education over a smartphone is like hoping that people will eat their broccoli, but right next to it, you put the most delicious dessert ever made. If you really want to deliver education to everyone, not only do you have to make it accessible, but also you have to make it so that people want to actually learn. And with Duolingo, we've been able to do this. And at the highest level, the way we've done this is by making the broccoli taste like dessert. I'll say it another way. What we've done is that we've used the same psychological techniques that apps like Instagram, TikTok, or mobile games use to keep people engaged. But in this case, we use them to keep people engaged, but with education. Let me give you some examples of these techniques. One of the most powerful ones is the notion of a streak. What a streak is it's just a counter that measures the number of days that you've used the product consecutively. You just take that number, you put it very prominently in your product, and then people come back every day. And the reason people come back every day is because, well, if they don't come back, that number resets to 0, and people don't want to lose their streak. It works. Now, on the one side, streaks have been criticized for example, getting teens addicted to Snapchat. But in the case of an educational app, streaks get people to come back to study every day. Now, to give you an idea of the power of streaks, in the case of Duolingo, we have over 3 million daily active users that have a streak longer than 365. Yes. That means they haven't missed a day in the last year or longer. Now, fun fact about streaks. What country do you think has the longest average streaks for an educational app? It's Japan. Of course. Shortest average streaks? Latin America, baby. But we're fun. Hey, we're fun. Another important mechanism to get people to come back to your product are notifications. On the one side, notifications can be really spammy and annoying. But in the case of an educational product, people actually want to be reminded to learn. In the case of Duolingo, we have a very sophisticated AI system that basically chooses when to send a notification and also what to say in each notification to maximize the probability that people come back. Now, interestingly, even after all this sophistication, it turns out that the algorithm for choosing what time to send you a notification is pretty simple. Do you know what is the best time to send people a notification? I'll tell you. It's 24 hours after they used the product last. Because, and there's an easy explanation. If you were free yesterday at 3 p.m., you're probably free today at 3 p.m. as well. So this is what a very sophisticated millions of dollars of AI found. It's funny. Now, with notifications, you shouldn't be spammy. And we're not spammy. With Duolingo, we actually stop sending notifications after 7 days of inactivity. So if you don't use Duolingo for 7 days, we stop sending you notifications. Now, at some point, it occurred to us, if we're stopping to send people notifications, we should let them know. So we started sending this notification to people saying, hey, these reminders don't seem to be working. We'll stop sending them for now. You know what people do when they get this notification? They come back. Passive aggressive. Works for my mother, works for Duolingo. These passive-aggressive notifications are really good at getting people to come back because they feel like our green owl mascot has given up on them. So they come back. And speaking of our green owl mascot, by the way, because all our notifications come from our green owl mascot, and, well, he's passive-aggressive and also pretty pushy, this has given rise to a lot of memes on the internet that make fun of just the great lengths that he will go through to get you back to learn a language. Here's one of my favorite ones. It's a meme. It's one of my favorite ones. It's basically, looks like you forgot your Spanish lessons, and then there's an intruder alert. Presumably the owl broke into your house to get you to learn a language. Now, Duolingo has entered the zeitgeist, and there's thousands of memes, there's SNL skits about it, and it's because we've managed to get people to want to learn a language by using the same techniques that mobile games and social media use to get people engaged. And this is a really important point, let me say this. I don't actually believe that there's a way to make an educational app be as engaging as something like TikTok or Instagram or mobile games. But the good news is that, and by the way, the reason I don't believe that is because ultimately you have to teach people something, and it's hard to compete with like cats and celebrities. But the good news is that I don't think you have to. See, here's the thing. When you're learning something, you get meaning out of it. Whereas when you're scrolling for 2 hours on Instagram, a lot of times afterwards, you feel like you just wasted your time. So I think it's actually okay if your educational product is only 80 or 90% as engaging as something like TikTok, because the other 10 or 20% will be provided by people's internal motivation, though, of course, not much more than that. This is really a key point. If you want to get people to do something meaningful, you can use the same techniques that apps like social media use to get people to do it. And even if you're not as engaging as those apps are, you can still get hundreds of millions of people to use your product. In the case of Duolingo, for example, there are more people learning languages on Duolingo in the United States than there are people learning languages across all US high schools combined. And this is true in most countries in the world. My hope is that, well, I know we can do this, but my hope is that as humanity, we can do what Duolingo has done for learning languages, but for all other subjects, where we can get people to learn math with mobile phones, like millions of people to learn math with mobile phones, or physics, or whatever. I hope for a future in which screen time is not a bad thing, in which we can deliver high-quality education to everyone, rich or poor, using a mobile phone. But the single most important thing that I can end this talk with is a reminder to please, pretty please, I beg you, do your language lessons today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Luis, thank you so much. Thank you. I wonder if you can just say a little bit more about that last point, about how do you think that you can apply this type of thinking to other subjects? So you mentioned math, you mentioned things like that. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think in particular subjects that are learned through repetition. And it turns out most things that are kind of really meaningful are learned through like thousands and thousands of repetitions. You learn to read through repetition, you learn elementary school math through repetition. Most things that you can learn through repetition, you can actually gamify and turn into something like Duolingo, where people just do it a lot and do it fun. It's a little harder for things like explanations. That's probably going to require some really good videos. Sal Khan is doing a really good job with that. But for things that require a lot of repetition, I think we can use the same methods.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.